Welcome, everyone. My name is Tony Reeves, and this is In the Know. Today, we're starting the first part of my series called 30, 40, 50s and Beyond, What I Learned Along the Way. And the first part of the segment is I want to talk about what I call age 30 to 34, or what I affectionately refer to as the transition. Now, a lot of you probably have heard, when you graduate from high school, you're now heading off into taking over the world, or maybe when you graduate from college, you're taking over the world. Yeah, those periods of time are significant, and they're significant in the fact that, you're 18, so you're going off into the world, or maybe you're 21 and you're graduating from college, or maybe you're getting out of boot camp and so forth like that. But that's really not what I mean by the transition. When I'm talking about the transition I'm talking about that time period where you've been out in the world for about a decade. You've, between 18 to 28, 29, maybe a decade and a year. And what usually happens during that time period is you start getting an idea of who you are. You've worked in a few different areas. You've probably done quite a few things. I ain't gonna lie, I ran the streets pretty hard during that time period. And you start realizing that you're wanting a little bit more. You want to start solidifying what the next part of your life is going to look like. For me, by the time I hit 30, I had already served in the military as a naval officer. I'd been commissioned as an Army Reserve officer before that. I had actually gotten a bachelor's degree and gotten a master's degree. And so I had a few things underneath my belt by that point. So by the time I turned 30, I was in a long-term relationship with a beautiful young lady who would become my wife, and I started looking at things differently. So let's talk for my transition. My period of time is from 1999 to 2003. So 1999, I'm 38 years of age. And so what was happening at that time? Well, I had just finished my first year of law school at Florida State University. Now, what's important for me was that I had literally just resigned my commission the year before. So I was on active duty. I was a naval officer. I was commensurate with what's called a captain for all the other ranks, but in the Navy, it's called a lieutenant. So I thought I was balling around this thing. And then finally I got a unique opportunity to go to law school, and I decided, man, I can't pass up on this opportunity. Now don't get me wrong. I wasn't forward thinking about it because my mom was really the one that kind of convinced me to make the decision. She didn't tell me to go to law school. She just told me, whatever decision you make sure it's the right decision, just not the safe one. So I took it upon myself to go. And so I resigned my commission, and I then found myself at Florida State, fall of 98. So in 1999, turning 30, and where am I at? I'm just finishing my first year of law school. I'm really excited about it. And like I said, it's still wild because here's one of the reasons, and we'll talk about this at the end, why I call this the great transition for me, is because now I'm a year out from, in my mind, a secure job. I was a commissioned officer literally less than a year before. I was a commissioned officer. I literally was working in a field that I liked. I was meeting great people, and I literally said, I'm going to let that go and go to law school to be an attorney. So here I am after my first year. I don't have a clue what the future is going to hold. And that's part of the danger, and that's what you realize when you're in school, is that you spend so much time focusing on getting through the school that you don't really think about the future. So here I am in law school, my first year. I don't know what I want to do when I get out because I'm so focused on the fact that I might not graduate that I'm solely just stressing out and only focusing on that. So during the time period that I was there, I only focused on going to school. So I am, just finished my first year. The summer of 1999, a good number of my friends, not all of my friends, but a good number of my friends in law school chose to study abroad. I did not think about how I could make that happen. And the sad part was, it wasn't even a think. I had convinced myself that I couldn't afford to go. Now, mind you, none of my friends are rich, but they found ways to go because it was a part of the university's study abroad program. I could have investigated it, but I chose not to. So I ended up saying, I'm going to stay and I'm going to work during that summer. So friends go over to Oxford. I'm working as a law clerk. I get a job working for my very first law firm as a law clerk. My wife is a young lady I'm dating at the time who would become my wife. She's in another state. She's in North Carolina. So, of course, I'm going back and forth to visit her whenever I get the opportunity to. But that summer is just basically me, work, and then one of my fraternity brothers that I pledged with in college, he relocated up to Tallahassee where I was at. And so needless to say, my social life increased because he was happy to be in the same area that I was at for the first time in years. So we hit the streets on a regular basis. And so then at this particular point, as the summer progressed, friends come back, we start segueing into the fall of 1999. And it's wild because I'm still living life as a college student. Of course, I'm a little older at this point. Like I said, I'm just turned 30. So as a result, some of the things that I would have done in my 20s in terms of hitting the clubs, don't get me wrong, I did go to the clubs. Most times I went to the club, I was either going as a blocker for my female classmates who wanted to be able to say, okay, if they dealt with some knucklehead, they could say I'm with him. Or my boy, and he and I would hit the clubs. I was basically his wingman. But for me, because I was more than happy to spend my time hanging at the house, in my staying in my room. I had a video game back in my apartment. I had a computer back in my apartment. As long as I had those things, I was good to go. I relished the opportunity to not have a whole lot of responsibilities. But going into the fall, it was your second year, and I can tell you, when you're in your second year of law school, there's a phrase that they typically tell you. The first year of law school, they scare you to death. Second year, they work you to death. Third year, they bore you to death. The reason why they say that is in your first year of law school, you're being introduced to a new way of thinking and a new way of talking. I'm not saying that you're going to teach you a foreign language. It's just that there is lawyer speak in terms of it. And you can know if you met a lawyer, there is a way they talk. And that's kind of conditioned into you from law school. But your second year, you're really hitting the grind because you've gotten all of your basic fundamental courses out of the way, which are used to build upon your other ones. And so you are now, boom, in it to win it. So for me, into 99, I am deeply entrenched into my second year. I just finished my first year. I'm rolling. So we're now making this thing do what it do. Now, heading into 2000, a little different. I've now finalized my second year. I'm in a unique situation because now my wife, I keep calling my wife because she is, my girlfriend has now relocated from North Carolina to Florida. She's in St. Pete at this time. And so now it makes it a little easier for me to get to her as opposed to where I was going to before. I got the second year underneath my belt. I've changed clerk jobs. I was clerking or working for this one firm, and then I started working for the state in a different capacity. And here's where it becomes interesting. My fraternity brothers, I have some fraternity brothers down south that would come up to visit me on a regular basis, and we would regularly go to Arkansas, which is my home state, and just kind of hang out and so forth, which is a lot of fun. But here's the thing that's a kicker. I still haven't stopped to think about what the future is going to hold. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I would probably tell people. And when I give you my 5-year review at the end of this, you'll understand where I'm coming from. At this point, I have completed 2 years of law school. During the 2 years while I was doing the other thing I didn't mention, during this 2-year time period, one of the things they have us do is we have to actually start our background check. So I actually started my background check in fall 98, the moment I got admitted. And to basically do everything I needed to do so that by the time I got ready to take the bar, I wouldn't have to worry about any of that. And so sure enough, I go through this whole scenario. So I'm at the end of my second year. I'm starting to get different things taken care of. In terms of my background checks. The way they do it for us in law school, you pay for your bar review courses well in advance. So I paid for the bar review course. I've paid to get admitted to the bar. And for those of you who are like, what does that mean? You're talking a couple $1,000s to get admitted to the bar, to get your bar license to practice. And that's why they tell you to start paying on that sucker so that when you graduate, This way, all you have to do is basically, get sworn in, take the bar exam, pass it, and get sworn in. So we're now at the end of 2000, and we're now into 2001, and 2001 is on and popping. So this is the year I'm turning 32 years of age. A lot of things happened during this year. One, I graduated from law school. Spring of 2001, graduated from law school. I take the bar. So that I literally, not only do I take the bar, but because the bar exam, you're talking about, I spend from May, portion of May, pretty much a good portion of May, all of June, and like half of July. I think 3/4 of July, because the bar exam typically falls on the last week of July. So I literally spent the entire summer studying. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how the heck did you pay for that? Because, more importantly, how did you support yourself? As fate would have it, I actually took out a bar loan, which enabled me to sustain myself. And the fascinating part is that that's what they encourage us all to do. So if you had the financial ability to be able to support yourself, like if you got hired for a firm, some firms would hire you and basically, that's how you sustained yourself. But I was amongst the many students who took out loans just to survive. And not only to take care of paying for the bar prep courses that I had to cover that I didn't have addressed early on, but also take care of things like, food and rent and bills and stuff like that. Because you've got to remember, at that point in time, I'm no longer a student, so I'm no longer getting financial aid. I'm no longer getting scholarships. I am now just focusing on the bar. So I spend that summer focusing on the bar exam in Tallahassee, Florida. I drive to Florida. The bar exam for Florida, the bar exam is only administered twice a year, February and July, and it's administered in the same place, the Tampa Bay Convention Center. So that was a unique phenomenon. Man, I had never seen anything like that before in my life. It's one thing when you go and you take tests and so forth. Wrap your brain around, for those of you who've taken the SATs, ACT, or GREs and stuff like that, that's one thing. But even the LSAT, when I took the law school admission test back when I was 28, that's one thing, or 29, 28. That's one thing. But to walk into a convention center hall where you've got students, or, we're all graduates at this point, graduates from universities from the entire state, as far west as Florida State, as far east, I think, is Florida Coastal College, as far south is the University of Miami. So we're all converging on Tampa for this exam that we've all probably spent about a good 2.5 months preparing for. And here's the other dangerous part about this whole thing. When you're focusing on an exam like that, you typically are not focused on anything else. Because I'll be the first to tell you, when I was focusing on the bar exam, I was not thinking about anything else at all. Now, I will tell you, kind of as a side story, I kind of chuckle when I think about this, is that I had to laugh. When the bar exam came, I actually went down a little early. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the geography of Florida, Tallahassee is about 4 hours from Tampa. And so for me, I have my own car. I don't know what possessed me to do this. I think it was because my car was old at this point. The car I was driving at that point had been it was a 10-year-old car. I bought it in 91 Cavalier. And I can tell you that this car was old. I can tell you it was old, and it was really, I had beat the hell out of this car. I mean, it really makes no sense for how much I beat the hell out of this car. So, needless to say, drove it all the way down, and I didn't drive it to the bar exam. I didn't drive it to take the bar exam. I actually took the bus. Now, for those of you who are like, what kind of bus? You mean the big red bus? And he's like, no. Good old-fashioned Greyhound. Yes, I said it, Greyhound. So I rode Greyhound bus from Tallahassee to Tampa. Now, for those of you who are sitting going, are you crazy? I say, listen, when I was in college, I used to take the bus from Tampa to Little Rock, Arkansas, which is about a 24-hour ride, which that's a whole different story. If you ever want to know, let me know. I'll be more than happy to do a podcast on it, because the number of times I rode on the bus and had all kind of cray things happen. Woohoo! Especially that last trip. But I digress. So, in this instance, I rode the bus down to Tampa. My wife picked me up from the bus station, drove me to her place in St. Pete, and basically I spent the weekend before the bar at her place studying. And of course, I'll be the first to tell you, I was a jerk. See, when you're that stressed, because that's a lot of pressure to put on you, because most people will tell you no one wants to take a test like that more than once. If you could just knock it out and call it a day and just keep on trucking, that's the ideal thing. The last thing you want to do is put your license in jeopardy and have to take that sucker over and over again. So whenever I used to see people who's taken the exam 3 or 4 or 5 times, I always applaud them, because that's stressful. It's stressful because you've got to stop, you got to keep reevaluating, you got to restudy, and it's just so disruptive. But in my case, I got lucky. I passed the exam, and of course, you don't find out right there and then. So here's, for those of you who are like, you found out right there? No. Took the exam in July, last week of July. After that, went back to my wife's house, hung out and everything like that. Rode back up to Tallahassee. I forgot how I got up there. I think a friend brought me back up. And literally, I think if I remember correctly, I only had a week left. It was weird how they did it, because basically what it was, I remember, I had to be out of the apartment that I was staying in. It was an alumni apartment for the graduate students. I had to be out by August 1st. So wrap your brain around this. The bar exam's on a Tuesday, and you figure the way it worked, and it was brilliant when you think about it. I was literally, you figure the bar exam was on that last week of July. Okay, so let's ponder on this for a second for those of you who are trying to figure this out. The bar exam is on the 24th, and typically it's a Tuesday. I think it's a Monday or Tuesday. It's like the last Tuesday, Wednesday, I think, if I remember correctly. So the bar exam is on the 24th, 25th, okay, of July of 2001. I had to be out of my apartment by August 1st. So I literally had 1 week. So I'm sitting here, and I spent the entire summer. I graduate April. I graduate April. Let me see. I graduate the last week of April. I believe the last week of April of 2001. We took a break, and then literally we started rolling. Or May. It was either April or May. I think it was May 4th. I can't remember exactly when, but if I remember correctly, I remember May 4th. And I remember we all agreed to take like a break before we started diving in. And so then about a week or two, and then we started hitting it full throttle. Boom, boom, boom. Full throttle. And so you figure, here we are. Bar exam's over. No more studying. And I literally have to pack up my apartment and get out of that sucker as fast as possible. I mean, move as fast as possible. Now, let me tell you the one thing that you don't hear in the course of this whole discussion. A job. And this is one of the dangers that I talk to young people whenever I try to about forward thinking, because I didn't know this. And you would think this is my third time go around in terms of educational system, bachelor, master's, now doctorate. And every one of those, I had no job lined up. Master's was kind of different to a degree, because when I came out of my master's, I was already working. And so I wasn't actively looking for another job, and then an opportunity presented itself to go into the Navy. So taking that aside, again, here I am in law school, graduated from law school, and I don't have a job lined up. Nothing to show for. Now, here's the thing that's fascinating. In law schools, we have a thing called on-campus interviews, OCIs, where what happens is that typically early in the process, usually during your second year and your third year, you'll get prominent employers to come through. Now, let me just be clear about this. My grades weren't the best in the world. I was probably a C student, to say the best. Yeah, that's probably the middle of the range anyway. And typically, the employers who come through looking to interview people for on-campus interviews if they're trying to talk to you in your second year, that usually means you're at the top of the food chain. Usually if they're coming to talk to you in your third year, you'll get a few of those top of the food chain. But usually as you get closer to graduation, you'll probably see more and more of state attorneys and public defenders. That's not a knock on them. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. So ideally, from a financial standpoint, you probably want to get hired by a big time firm. That's kind of the condition the culture and the condition that they impart upon you. Now, it's funny because I participated just for the hell of it because they told us, hey, just for the hell of it, give it a shot. Let's be clear. I had no thought in my mind that I would have a chance. And this is why it's important for me and I had to learn. I learned much later in life about evaluating your skill sets. That when somebody interviews you or calls you up, it's because there's something about you that has caught their attention. That they're saying, that person I want to hear. There's something about them that makes us go, got to give this person a shot. And I'll tell you, I really messed that up because during that time I had.
Ever notice what happens when your home is beautifully organized? You have more space, more room to breathe. At California Closets, our designers know just what questions to ask to create exactly what you want. Your personalized experience includes custom design and installation to deliver a result that truly reflects your style and needs. That's the California Closets difference. We call it practical magic. Book your free design consultation today at californiaclosets.com.
2 or 3 interviews with prominent law firms, and I had no clue why. I'm like, why are they interviewing me? And instead of treating this as an opportunity to go in and blow them away, I was like one of those happy to be there kind of people. Woohoo! I'm just happy to be here. And didn't realize, I did the thing you're supposed to do, because one of the things they tell you to do is when people are interviewing you, research them, look at what they're offering, look at and start preparing yourself mentally. And nobody really I don't know how many people put that in an application, but really kind of start thinking to yourself, how are you going to, what skill sets do you have that could benefit this organization? And I never looked at it like that at all. And so needless to say, I blew all those interviews because when they were talking to me, I didn't view this from the standpoint that I had something to offer. So blew those out of the water, didn't have any jobs lined up at all. So, but for me, pause on this for a second. I am excited because at this particular point, I have graduated from law school in 2001. I have taken the bar. I actually had to take an ethics exam because there's 2 parts to the bar that you got to take. You have to take the bar exam itself in terms of the law, and then there's an ethical portion. And I had taken it before and didn't pass it, but this time around, I didn't have a problem with it. So I still remember this like it was yesterday. September 10th, 2001. God, I can still remember this because I was petrified about looking at my bar results. I did not want to see those things. No, sirree, Bob. Not me. And so I made a deal with my wife. She was working. And so part of the agreement that I made with her was that, once I got a job, that she could quit her job because she wasn't really overly moved by what she was doing. And so we were cool there. But then when it came time for the bar results, I didn't want to look. So I literally told her, I'm going to give you my password and the website that you need to go to. Let me know if I passed. But I don't know if I want to know. And she's like, okay, you're stupid. So she then says, okay, is there something I can tell you that lets you know that you passed? I said, so how about this? When you contact me, you just tell me when you've looked at the results and say, hey, you can let me know if I need to prepare your resume. You telling me I will prepare your resume will let me know that I passed the bar. She said, cool, I can do that. So she's asking me, okay, when are the results going to be viewed? Ready? And I think if I remember because at that point in time, they weren't going to be available until like noon. Now, let me tell you about my wife, because my wife is an assassin. So she knows I have a tendency to be a jerk at times. So she doesn't normally come at me jerk for jerk. So when she gets annoyed with me for me being mean sometimes, she does the end around and does the gut punch. So wrap your brain around this. And I found this out after the fact, because I'm going to let you know how she gets now. So what she ends up doing is I tell her, noon is when this result's going to be available. So what does she do? She goes in and she checks as soon as she goes into work, just in case. Well, guess what? Unbeknownst to me, the results were out first thing in the morning, which typically they're not. Do you think my wife called me? No. And so she just let me sit there and stew. So, of course, I'm sitting here for hours freaking out like, oh, my gosh, how am I doing this? So finally she called me around 11 o'clock to say, hey, all right, let's go in. Let me see what you got. Got your number here. Okay. Well, I can tell you one thing. You better get on the computer and start working on my resume. And I'm like, God, I'm going off and everything. I'm like, yeah. And so she said, you were worried, weren't you? I said, I've been freaking out all day. She said, good for you. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Well, I knew you had passed from this morning because the results were out. I was like, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You knew the results were already out and you chose not to tell me? She said, because you were being a jerk. And I'm like, you know what? I ain't even mad at you. So needless to say, hey, she made her point. I took it, kept on going. I always tell people when I'm talking to them that I say, I always remember September 11th because September 10th is when I got the bar results. I always remember how my life changed literally from one day to the next because on September 11th is when I started looking for work. And I often tell people that I always remember September 11th because I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine who was also from New York, who had also graduated in law school with me. And she and I were both talking and we both were looking at the TV and we were like, is this real? Just everything that was going on. Like I remember watching in real time when the second plane hit the tower because I literally did not believe what I was looking at was real. I couldn't believe it. So that's the other thing that kind of jumped off of me. So here we are, 9/11. And then also I remember that after 9/11, like I think about a month or two after it happened, I had the opportunity to travel to the University of Minnesota with two of my frat brothers. One of my frat brothers' little brother played as a cornerback at the University of Minnesota. And that was the first time we had traveled since then. Now, let me tell you, for those of you who have never flown, who didn't fly during that, probably the 6 months after 9/11, the airports were wild. We're talking about the coronavirus and how things are now in terms of traveling. Man, back then it was crazy because literally they had National Guard and the reserves at the airports. They had bomb sniffing dogs, basically checking your car. The lines to get through TSA were around the block. You were encouraged to get to the airport 3 to 4 hours before your flight. They had snipers in there. I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But that was the nature of the beast at that time. That's the environment that we were experiencing during that window. Now, I also started, I had also relocated during that time period. Now, I know that I'm kind of jumping around here, but this all happened in 2001. I had moved, like I said, I moved in with my wife. We went to Minnesota. I had also gotten a job, my first job, working for, I don't know if I can call it small, maybe it's a medium-sized firm. It wasn't a solo firm. It wasn't a small firm like 1 to 5. It was like 10 to 12. So we'd say about medium-sized law firm. But the attorney that I worked for, he was the only one in the state. So that was kind of cool. So in 2001, I luck up and I get hired to work for this law firm. And I'm like, whoo-hoo, all right. So now we go into 2002. Now, let me throw out this other unique, interesting thing. I proposed to my wife on Christmas Eve, 2001. And it was funny because we drove to her parents' house first. We spent Christmas in Colorado Springs. And that was a wild drive. And then I proposed to her on New Year's Eve because my plan was, trying to be romantic, was I wanted 2001 to end with her being my girlfriend, but 2002 to begin with her being my fiance. There's a few of you who be like, oh, that's so sweet. Yeah. But I convinced her that we should get married on her birthday. And it was funny because all the guys was like, yeah, dap it up, dog. That's pretty high. But all the women were like, he's cheating you out of gifts. I'm like, wow, it's amazing how we look at those things completely different. So now we moved to 2002. 2002, I'm 33 years of age. And I can tell you, it's an interesting period of time for a variety of reasons. One, because I'm planning a wedding. So my mind is wholly focused on planning a wedding. Two, I am working at a brand new job that I am learning skills that I've never had before. And three, I got a lot of friends of mine who are also going through this window of people getting married and so forth like that. So I'm going through this window where we're going to weddings on a regular basis. Also during this time period, I am stressing a lot. And part of the reason why I'm stressing is because even though I'm doing this brand new job, I've asked my wife, I told my wife she could quit hers. And to be honest, I didn't look at the numbers. And you would say, what do you mean by the numbers? I didn't look at the numbers from the standpoint that I never stop. I never really stopped, not trying to be funny. I never stopped for a second to analyze what the funds and finances will actually look like. If that sounds weird. Meaning, it's really easy to think in your mind that, oh, they're going to pay me this and I can take care of everything. Well, I didn't analyze what everything was. Because, I'd never, my wife was my longest relationship. I'd never lived with anyone other than myself. So, I didn't think about the fact of helping her with any bills that she had. I've been, running solo for the longest, so I didn't know what that meant. So I had, not necessarily dealt with a lot of things the best way. So when she quit and I started realizing how much it was going to be a struggle for me by myself to pay for everything, she quickly and quietly every now and then reminds me that, I remember the parking lot in St. Pete. Because that's when I told her, I'm like, I'm going to need you to, get back in the workforce because this is not working for me because I'm having a hard time. I'm struggling. Could have said it a much better way, but knucklehead me. So which now leads us into 2003, the end of my first 5 years transitional journey. And what's happening? Well, one, I began 2003 getting married. So that's awesome. Two, still going to a boatload of different weddings because you're going to find for your friends, there's going to be this window when your friends start getting married. It's probably going to last for about a good 5 to 10 years. And it's going to be like, what? I said, trust me. Usually around age 21, 22, 23 to about 33, 34, there's going to be this window where your friends, it just seems like every time you look up, somebody's calling you talking about, come on, let's go. Somebody's getting married. It's going to work you, but hey, that's just the nature of the beast. So then now I get to this particular period of time, my first, between 30 and 34. At 34 years of age, 2003, I've got married. I'm still going to friends' marriages. I am working at a place right across the street from my alma mater, and I'm, the young fraternity brothers there are reaching out to me to help them out, so I'm spending a lot of time with that. And I'm also trying to figure out what my skill sets are with regards to what I'm doing in my new job. I've only been there going on 2 years, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing and how I can maximize on this. Now, part of the reason why I'm calling this the transition, and let me tell you my 5-year review. And one of the things that I'm going to do when I'm doing this is at the end of kind of telling you what happened during that time period, I'm going to tell you what I learned from that time period. I wish I would have learned it then, but I'm learning it now so I can share it with you so hopefully it can benefit you a little bit better. First, I can tell you that when you're in college, and what I had to learn was that I never thought about the long-term effect of from law school to working. When I got to law school, I had spent so much of my energy and my focus was on getting the degree. That was the thing that was the most important to me. But I never stopped to do a couple of things, to think about what kind of job I wanted when I got out. Where would I want to live when I got out? Because my wife automatically thought I was wanting to stay in Florida. But the reality is that even though I was a jerk about it, I love her. And wherever she was at, that's where I was going to go. So if she wanted to stay in North Carolina, if she wanted to go to Virginia, or she wanted to go to New York, I was going to go there. And the other thing that was problematic is that I never stopped to evaluate what skills that I had. Meaning, and you say, well, what do you mean by what skills that you had? Well, one of the problems is looking at my work experience, here's a guy. I had worked for the States. I had worked in the military. I had worked in a field unit. I'd worked in a headquarters unit in terms of for the state. I had worked in the military as a naval officer. I had a master's degree in industrial hygiene. I had worked in that environment as an industrial hygiene officer. I had a very finite advanced skill set. I had developed safety programs. I had conducted program meetings with employers and union personnel. I had gone out to on-site visits. I had gone out and done inspections and so forth. I had done so many different things, but almost in every instance, whenever I got ready to transition to something new, I was almost like I tried to abandon all the stuff that I'd done because I'm relearning something new, as opposed to taking those skills and using it to build upon the foundation that I built. And that's what happened with the law school way. In the law school way, is that I started my career in the legal community as a restart, but not a build up. And that's what happens. Sometimes when, if you're doing something for a particular period of time and you feel like you're going in a whole different direction, sometimes it's easy to convince yourself that the skills that you acquired in that previous life may not be useful or needed or beneficial towards what you're going to do next. And that is quite honestly not smart and not truthful at all. And I made that mistake early on, not realizing that. Also, I didn't access my resources. Now, listen carefully. By the time I got to law school, I had graduated from two very prominent schools in Florida, where they both had active alumni bases that I could have easily accessed, but I didn't. I pledged a fraternity, and I still had frat brothers all over the place that I have access to who were doing exactly what I was doing. Now, mind you, there were some frat brothers there in law school, but just after that, I never looked for somebody to explain to me, how should I maneuver? How should I be tactically smart about using the skills that I've acquired to move out into the next phase of my career, or even look at determining what my next phase of my career. I still remember this one attorney who's not a fraternity brother or anything like that. When he looked at my resume and asked me the things I'd done, he's like, why are you trying to work in Florida? Your skill sets would be so well served in an industrial area like Pennsylvania, like New York, like New Jersey, like the Midwest. And it never crossed my mind to do that. Not once. Didn't cross my mind at all. And so that was another thing. Also, when you find yourself in a new environment, when you're restarting your career, a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in listening to what others, or what is traditionally the way you should be doing things, as opposed to establishing your own path. For instance, when I got hired for the firm that I worked at, I didn't plan on going anyplace else. I mean, seriously. I hadn't, and that's one of one of my buddies teased me about that. I said, if you look at my work history, I have had a history, especially up to that point, of getting to jobs thinking that I was going to be there for the long term, and then realizing or opportunities would present themselves. I worked for the state. I really didn't see life beyond the state. Then the Navy came. I got to the Navy. I didn't necessarily see a life beyond the Navy. And then all of a sudden went to law school. And then I got this job, and I did the same thing again. And because I didn't use the resources, and then I didn't sit down and talk to anybody and say, what do you want? What do you want for yourself in terms of what kind of life you want to live? Is doing what you have to do here going to get you there? Do you know what it means to be a partner? Because in my mind, let me just be clear here. I thought partner means, let me just be clear. I didn't know what partner meant. I thought partner meant you were kind of the boss per se, but you just made more money. I didn't think about it from a standpoint that, the management of the firm, responsibilities for training, responsibilities for generating fees as a part of your responsibility. I didn't know about any of those things. So I didn't know to think to myself how this was going to be, how what I was going to do was going to shape me becoming a partner. And if I became a partner, how was that going to get me to where I wanted to be? Didn't even think about any of those things whatsoever. And so because I didn't investigate what those things meant, it meant the things that I was doing going forward may or may not have necessarily benefited me in terms of where I was trying to go. Because in essence, I didn't know where I was going to go. So if I didn't know where I was going to go, how could I define the best way to get there? Which you'll probably see, and things will probably make more light of this when I explain to you the next 5. So the next time I talk on the next part of the series of 30, 40s, and 50s and beyond, and talking about that and so forth, we're going to talk about the next portion of my transition. And that was between 2004 and 2008. And that was when I was 35 to 39. And you'll probably find yourself in that same position. When you hit about 35 to 39, it's no longer a transition. It is now the first step of the next evolution. And I want you to listen to how I got to that point during that window of time. And I hope it benefits you. Again, this is Tony Reeves. Hope you liked it. Hey, if you like this, make sure you either hit like, subscribe, follow, whatever device you're listening to, whether it be iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Radio Public, whatever. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you let me know. Put comments, because I'm always looking to provide additional content. Glad you were here with me. Have a good day. Stay safe. And as always, my name is Reeves, and you are once again in the know.
Ever notice what happens when your home is beautifully organized? You have more space, more room to breathe. At California Closets, our designers know just what questions to ask to create exactly what you want. Your personalized experience includes custom design and installation to deliver a result that truly reflects your style and needs. That's the California Closets difference. We call it practical magic. Book your free design consultation today at californiaclosets.com.
It's time to take control of your investing education. TD Ameritrade's fully immersive curriculum includes a wide range of educational resources to match your preferred style of learning. Rated Best in Class Education 2022 by stockbrokers.com. Learn more at tdameritrade.com/education resources.